So my friends and gems, here we are. We're going to continue reading, reviewing, and applying the Mitochondria Manifesto. If you haven't got your copy yet, please run out and get it. I don't make a single penny from having you buy the book, but you will benefit from reading the book because not only will you be able to follow along with the information that we're going to go over here, but you'll be able to have a little conversation with the author. So I want to suggest to you that you do something a little bit different as you read this book. This is something that I've been doing for a very long time. Every time I buy a book, I always write on the front page, see how I have the date when I started reading the book. And then I actually write in the book as I'm reading the book and as I have ahas, I realize that I'm having a conversation with the author. He's sharing this information with me. And as I have revelations of things that are significant and relevant, then I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember when. Or I might have a question. And it's like, well, what about da 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 da? Or whatever commentary it is that I would be having if he were dialoguing with me in person. And then that way I can then sometimes look up on YouTube or on Google to see if perhaps that author has already answered the questions that I might have. I would encourage you to write those questions there, and then you can go onto my YouTube channel at the bottom here in the comments below. Go ahead, put your questions, and you can also put your comments as well. I'm going to be having RD Lee come onto the show, and we will get into a bigger, deeper dive. But really, you need to get the book. You need to be a good student, invest in yourself, get the book. Don't just throw it on the shelf. Open it up and begin to read and follow along with us. You can go back. I will create I will create a playlist of just the episodes that we've done of the little bit of reading that we've been doing so far, so that you're reading, you're reviewing, and you're applying some of the principles that you're learning from this Mitochondria Manifesto. All right, so let's keep going here. So where we finished off was, I love the beginning of this. And this is not a new chapter. This is just the heading here. And it says, your body isn't defective. The real problem is your environment.
Oh, yeah.
That is letting you know that this is going to be some juicy content. All right. So let's see what it says here. So it says, whether it's learned or assumed. You know what they say about assuming. We won't go into
right.
We automatically look inward when something goes wrong with our health because we believe the defect is inside us. So to back up that belief, we scrutinize tests like blood work or MRIs for more evidence our body is betraying us. I wonder, or is it really betraying us, or is it doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing?
Exactly.
It actually is doing what it's supposed to be doing. We'll elaborate on that in a little bit here. So any health malfunction we're experiencing must mean our body is broken in some way, right? And I'm going to make a note here. I have a few things to say about that. So, of course, reasoning like this makes perfect sense if you think like a typical health consumer. Ooh. However, in most cases, it's just not true. Your body is not malfunctioning. What's more, it's harmful to think that way because a lot of mistakes are made when you experience symptoms and assume they're the source, rather than seeing them for what they really are. Distress signals, they're red flags. Distress signals, the body sends to your senses. It's in code, asking for help. Check it out. The Mitochondria Manifesto is saying, those are red flags telling you something is off. And the body is responding the way it should in order to alert you. If you didn't know symptoms, then you would not know to change anything. Because you're the one who's living inside of this. I call it a meat suit. And I know that to some people it sounds crude, but it's actually literal. From a biology perspective, it is a meat suit. You know, it's the housing unit to hold up the bones, the organs, everything that is you. And so you're responsible, just like you're responsible for your car, you're responsible for your house, you're responsible for this house too. You know, your meat suit, right? So It says, for instance, all we can think about when suffering in some way is like if you're suffering from a headache, poor digestion, chest pain, weight, foggy thinking, or uncontrolled behavior. But what it says here, but where is it all coming from? Well, it's coming from inside your body, right? So that's what should concern us. What is our body really trying to tell us? So I'm going to pause right there real quickly because I just, there's a lot of people who have, especially, there are people who were fine prior to the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, separate from the whole big COVID. Let's put that aside. But just the threat of that and what was going on and the unknown created an anxious, hypertensive state in people where some people who used to be more calm all of a sudden became agitated, became anxious, and actually suffered legitimate. And I want to say this with all due respect, and it's legitimately so. They suffered post-traumatic stress syndrome from the constant stress of all of a sudden people who never watched the news starting to watch the news. People hearing about friends, family, neighbors, loved ones, people that are acquaintances, this perception of everybody dropping dead, from COVID, getting put on a respirator, then they're gone. That it can be. I'm not going to say it's always is, but it can be very anxiety producing.
Absolutely.
And it causes hypertension inside because all of a sudden your adrenals are going, oh, do I need to run and flee? And so the cortisol levels go up. You don't feel good, but your heart rate is elevating in anticipation that you might need to run or flee somewhere, right? Or fight something. And so if you have an elevated heart rate, your heart rate is normally 110 over 80 or 110 over 70. But now, because you've got you're glued to CNN or whatever the news channel, whatever, pick your poison, right? And now you're going, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, everybody's not dropping dead, but the perception is that there's a higher than normal rate of people that are coming because the boogie monster is out, and it might get, who knows who it's going to get next, and you want your children, your family, your loved ones to be fine, and you don't want it to get them, and you don't want it to get you either, right? You don't, who's next? So we have a global PTSD that has taken place over the last several years, since 2020. Inevitably, it's no different than the global PTSD that our Earth suffered, not to as great of an extent as the pandemic, but we kind of had, like when the atomic bomb, I wasn't alive for it, right? But I know my parents were alive for it. And when that big atomic bomb hit, Hiroshima in Japan, and that whole nuclear waste and fallout took place, and, not only did it take out many of the Japanese, but make no mistakes, it affected us here in the States as well, because radiation doesn't stay in a nice little box and says, oh, this nuclear waste is just going to stay in this geographic region. No, it's airborne, it seeps into the earth, it seeps into the water, and it spreads all over. So we're all affected by it. And then people who had friends and our family that were over there were horrified, and they suffered a shock. And that shock, after the shock wears out, that's PTSD. And we can see that in brain scans. If anybody is wondering, that's just an emotional chemical thing. No, we actually see that in brain scans. Make no mistakes. So let's move on further here. And let's talk about here. It says here, just as important in most chronic disease conditions, the body is behaving exactly the way it's designed to. It really is. So at least it's doing its best in a difficult situation using the resources it has available. We tend to forget the body has its own built-in compensation mechanisms and emergency procedures that it's running all the time, even though we can't think of anything besides either healthy or not healthy in the moment, okay? Again, the physical symptoms we use to diagnose disease are merely downstream consequences of our light, water, and electromagnetic environment acting upon our mitochondria and our circadian rhythms. So again, mitochondria are those tiny little organs that are inside each cell. So look around you for the sources of your health problems first, before you look inside, because it's your environment that's defective. Your environment is what's causing that domino effect where something is now taking place that's not it's less than pleasant inside your body. So it's not your environment that's defective, not you. The body rarely does anything by accident. That is so true. You have form follows function in biology and in nature at large. So the body rarely does anything by accident. So in most cases, what you perceive to be your body malfunctioning is just its way of coping with a flawed environment. Yep. As we'll discuss later, most of these influences lead into the story of mitochondria because 80 to 95% of diseases revolve. Listen to that. 80 to 95% of all diseases revolve around your mitochondria, while only 6 to 20% are primarily genetic. It's actually 5 to 20% are actually primarily genetic. I just misread that, so I just want to make sure that you guys see that. See right here, it says 5 to 20% are primarily genetic. Specifically, an accumulation of defects in our mitochondria creates some 90% of diseases, not bad genes. That's because mitochondria are profoundly more responsive to the environment than human DNA. I'm going to read that again. Listen up. That's because mitochondria, those little organelles inside each one of the 56 trillion cells in your body, they are profoundly more responsive to the environment than DNA. There it is, my friends and gems. Wow. That is definitely something to highlight, to be aware of, because that is telling you that you have more power than you previously thought. And I'm going to put this in highlighted version right here, because that's showing you that as you change your environment, the environment outside of your body and the environment that you bring inside your body, it can affect and alter and change the mitochondria inside your body, which in turn is going to change and dissipate whatever negative symptoms you're having inside your body. So it says, oh yes, he is definitely a student of Dr. Jack Kruse, because he's talking about Doug Wallace. So Dr. Doug Wallace, the world's leading mitochondria researcher, has shown that the vast majority of disease occurs without any changes to the genome, the human genome at all. Oh my gosh, my friends and gems, you guys got to read it for your own self. In fact, Dr. Doug Wallace, he's the one who won the Franklin Award. He's the one who discovered that mitochondria, you inherit that from your mother. And that's why genetic tests are mitochondrial. They're matrilineally driven because we inherit our mitochondria from our mother, not from our father. So the world's leading mitochondria researcher has shown that the vast majority of disease occurs without any changes to the human genome at all. Bam, there it is. That means for decades now and tens of millions spent, modern medicine has been studying the wrong genome in an effort to explain disease and treat it. Whoa, right there in plain English, there it is. So instead of finding the cure to cancer, Alzheimer's, or diabetes in human genetic defects, we now know for certain that chronic disease has very little to do with human nuclear genome. Instead, the answer to 0.95 out of 100, so from the tiny infinitesimally small all the way up to 100% health question is mitochondria and their gene expression. So remember, when you get sick, don't look within for the source of what ails you. Instead, examine what's wrong with your light, water, magnetic environment that's upsetting your biology. Those corrupted foundations of life are what's causing the disease of modern civilization. Note to self, you can't get well when you continue to be affected by the things that caused you to get sick. Oh my gosh. So I got to tell you, my friends and gems, so many doctors, healthcare practitioners, some brilliant biohacking scientists will tell you that you cannot get well in the same environment in which you got sick. I'm going to repeat that again. You cannot get well in the same environment that you got sick. Because oftentimes there are things, some people literally live in sick houses. Now, what do I mean by that? Sick houses What is a sick house? A sick house is a house that has some sort of infestation that has caused you, the inhabitant of that house, to then present themselves with some sort of respiratory condition, some sort of respiratory disease, some sort of respiratory compromise. Why? Because that infestation could be mold, it could be fungus, it could be that perhaps, let me paint a picture. Once upon a time, and this is a true story, once upon a time, in this tiny little town, not so tiny little town of Huntington Beach, California, there was this family with two kids, a husband and a wife. And at that particular time, it was the month of December, when all of a sudden this torrential storm with very high gales, really high winds, little short of hurricane speed winds, was rushing through that beach community. And for many of the houses that were close to that coastline, because Huntington Beach is a coastal community, for many of the houses, the west side of their roofs, depending on how new they were, the newer ones withstood it fine, but the ones that were 10, 15, or 20 years old did not fare so well. And so what ended up happening is that a lot of the tile ended up disintegrating. And so many of the people in different neighborhoods went out to discover that the next day on their grass, they had all this black stuff, brownish colored stuff. And it was, the tile had literally disintegrated because the winds were so high. There was a little bit of hail, and the winds were so high and the rain was so powerful that it disintegrated that half of their roof. And what happened inside the house was that they had leaks inside their house where they had to put buckets to capture the water so that the inside of the house would not flood. However, guess what? There was still water that got inside of the house from the outside of the home. And that water that got captured turned into black mold and a fungus. And guess what? Two of the inhabitants of the four that were in that house developed a respiratory disease, and they ended up having to get on a nebulizer to clear that thing that was now invading their lungs. And their lungs were doing what they're supposed to be doing, but really the solution was not just doing the nebulizer. The solution was stopping the growth of that fungus and that mold once it was identified. Of course, repairing the leaks in the roof, re-roofing, but also sealing the aspects of the house that made the house sick, that created that condition. The fungus didn't happen the night of the storm. That was the beginning, because now you had that trapped moisture in the inside of the home. And wherever you have trapped moisture, you have a tendency of developing mold and fungus. So that house became sick. And that house ended up having to be repaired, just as the bodies of the two of the four inhabitants ended up having to be repaired. The house also had to be repaired. And so once those things were addressed, the environment was addressed, along with taking care of course, having to do certain things to restore the health and well-being of the two of the four in that home. Then things got into balance and it was fine. That little family ended up selling that home after they repaired it, and then they moved to actually a larger home. And that actually is a personal story of what happened to me and my family. We ended up having that happen to us. And I know that there were several other families in my town that suffered very similarly. Some of them, all the family members came down with a respiratory situation, and in some families, only one of their family members did. But the bottom line is that it was something environmental that caused it. It wasn't something broken inside. Your lungs, when you have a foreign invader, a germ, a virus, a bacteria, a parasite, it doesn't matter. It's something that doesn't belong there. It will increase the level of mucus in your system to capture that and so that then it can purge it from the body through coughing, through blowing your nose, etc. It's a way of purging and detoxifying the body. So same thing. The other thing to note is sometimes people have large amounts of continuously having, phlegm and mucus, and they consume a large amount of dairy. Well, dairy will cause a greater mucus environment because you're taking in things that are not meant for humans to be in their body. Regular milk is just intended to make a little calf into a 2-ton cow. So more on that later. But the bottom line is the function of mucus. It's doing what it's supposed to do to protect the body, because if it didn't do that, then it would harm you further and then you would pass on quicker. All right, so let's move on. Speaking of environment, see, you could see that purple tint? That's blue light protection on my glasses to protect me from the blue light that I'm getting from the computer. All righty, so let's move on here. So instead of finding the cure to cancer, Alzheimer's, or diabetes to human genetic defects, we now know for certain that chronic disease has very little to do with human nuclear genomes. Yep. Instead, the answer is 0.95 out of 100 health questions is mitochondria. It's to question the mitochondria and their genetic expression. So remember, when you get sick, don't look within for the source of what ails you. Instead, examine what's wrong with your light, water, and magnetic environment that's upsetting your biology. Those corrupted foundations of life are what's causing the diseases of modern civilization. Note to self, you can't get well when you continue to be affected by the things that caused you to get sick. So again, if you have that type of situation where the house, some people have houses that have been built with drywall that is infected with certain chemicals or infected with certain agents that then when the people move into this brand new house, then they get sick after they've moved in. So something to think about. Something I've seen people who they were fine living in a particular home, and then all of a sudden they started different members of the family came down with illnesses. And I've told them, have you done anything? You know, we have to be very forensic, if you will, and looking at what is in your environment. Somebody says we were fine until we got to this house, and then one by one, different family members came down with things. I'm like, okay, you have a new house and you put new soil, you put new landscaping in. I'm like, well, what kind of fertilizer? What was the source of your fertilizer? Because if you are constantly playing in the front yard and the backyard and your feet are bare and now you're taking toxins in through your feet and then trucking it into the house, then that might be the cause. I've had people who they switched to an organic fertilizer and then the symptoms started to disappear. In another case, I had a young family who they had two young boys, and the youngest boy came down with acute leukemia. Now, one of the things was this family had 5 dogs, and they were all big dogs. They're all like big labs. And 2 of the dogs would sleep with the young boy. And he was kind of sandwiched between the 2 dogs because they were cuddled up next to him. They were kind of like protecting him, but they would sleep with him in bed every night. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Now, the thing is, the mother did not realize and recognize how powerful the anti-flea medication that she was using, like the shampoos and so forth, that she was bathing these dogs on a weekly basis because they were indoor dogs. And it was great at killing fleas, but that little boy who was only 6 years old, he's absorbing through the fur of those 2 dogs, front and back, every day to the point where he ended up coming down with that leukemia. Now it's interesting, and I'm not saying without without a shadow of a doubt. I just think it's interesting that when they changed to a flea shampoo that wasn't the same brand, that was milder in nature, that still removed fleas and so forth on the dogs, that child got better. So those are things that you need to look at in your environment. I hope that helps at least one of you with those 2 examples. So it says every single thing in the universe is made when sunlight slows down. So for my mystics, I really want to make sure that you guys pay attention to this. Everything in the universe is made when sunlight slows down. That's how things with that's how we manifest. The reason why these glasses, this microphone, see if you can see this microphone. Can I lift it up? Yeah, a microphone. Everything that's around us, it's slower wavelengths of light create mass. So the reason why we can manifest in meditation is because as we slow down our breath, we slow down our heart rate, we slow down our brain waves, we are slowing down the light waves that are inside our body, and we're able to create things with mass. It's the classic E = mc squared that Einstein talked about. For years, I used to wonder this, and I had so many other doctors and holistic care practitioners and professors and scientists that we always thought it was such a mystery that the back of your retina, the eye, the optic nerve, why is it that that's upside down? Well, it's pretty obvious why now. I know the answer now. I learned it through Dr. Jack Kruse. The reason why it's upside down is so that as you're outside in the sunlight, because our eyes are a circadian rhythm clock, as we are out in the sunlight and we are receiving photosynthesis, we're infrared light beings. The sun is 42% infrared light. We're out there first thing in the morning, exposed to UVA and UVB wavelengths of light that are in the natural God-made blue light spectrum, as opposed to man-made, which is like this computer screen, right? So now as you're outside, because that is flipped upside down, that slows down the wavelength of light as it goes into your eye so that it can turn those particles into vitamin A and vitamin D particles that then get absorbed into your blood. How brilliant is that? It's just a mechanism to slow down the wavelengths of light. Fascinating, isn't it? So exciting, so much fun. So we are going to read here the rest of this page because we're about a quarter till here. So everything in the universe is made when sunlight slows down. So you can start to see how physics create our material world by observing this simple fact. When light slows down, things with mass show up. Our bodies use this miracle of nature to make all sorts of biochemicals. So true. It's not just UVA light turning into vitamin A, which turns into a hormone in the body, vitamin UVB, which turns into vitamin D for the body. It's all sorts of things. Things that we can't live without. So for instance, when light hits an aromatic amino acid in the eye, it slows down and makes dopamine. Dopamine controls higher brain functions, muscles, and our behavioral reward system. When light hits another aromatic amino acid, that amino acid absorbs UV photons and makes melatonin. Let's read that again. That is powerful. When light hits another aromatic acid, amino acid to be exact, that amino acid absorbs UV photons and makes melatonin. Melatonin regulates sleep and mitochondrial recycling. Same thing with neurotransmitters that make you feel good, called serotonin. Serotonin is made when light hits the eye and the gut lining. Digestion releases light from food. Food is just a light barcode that then you ingest and it breaks. Then when we chew it, we masticate it, then it breaks it down, and then it turns it into electrolytes and electrons in the body. That's the actual mechanical function of that. Melanin as well. Melanin is the pigment that turns skin brown under UV light. It's made when one aromatic amino acid turns into another, which turns into another. Sunlight also makes a composite chemical in the brain's hypothalamus called POMC. I've always been riveted by POMC. I'm still so amused and allured by it. POMC. It's pro-opiomelanocortin POMC. It's hard to remember that long name. Gets separated into several chemicals, including an opioid called beta endorphin. Our body loves beta endorphin. Beta endorphins is what keeps our pain levels down. And it's a feel-good thing, which makes you feel good in the sun. Yeah, we release a lot of beta endorphins anytime we're out in the sun, as well as ACTH, which is a precursor to cortisol, a stress chemical. Interestingly enough, beta endorphin is the only opioid that does not increase cravings and dependency on other opioids. So it's the only opioid that's safe and non-addictive to get loaded on. It's funny that he says to get loaded on. So as it turns out, the eye is laden with amino acids like tryptophan, tyrosine, phenylamine, histidine. They capture sunlight to make neurotransmitters, but the most interesting thing about the energy to matter conversion is light controls the pathway directly as just described, or indirectly by food electrons that are programmed with light in photosynthesis. So converting light frequencies into material matter That transformation is happening in biology all the time. But it all begins as light. Everything is a light story. We're light beings, there's light outside, and then there's a transmission of light into our bodies, and a conversion takes place. Things with mass are made when high energy light slows down and condenses into lower energy matter, like your cell phone. This is lower energy matter. Then you can touch it or measure it as light is in its solid state. So we're going to end right there. Next time we'll pick up with the next section, which is more influential, biochemistry or biophysics? Ooh, what a provocative question to ask. So I'm sure a lot of you, if you're hearing that slowing down the wavelength of light is how we create, that's how we manifest, that's how we create matter. That's how the universe at large, from the very quantum level to the largest level, as you slow down the wavelength of light, that's how you create things with mass in it. That's E equals mc squared. If any of you have ever wondered, it's like, well, what relevance does E equal mc squared? You know, Einstein's theory of relativity. How can I benefit from that? What good does it do for me to know that? The application is that as you slow, and we're doing it. This is the funny thing. Every single one of us have been doing it from the time we were born, because as soon as we perceive light through our eyes, we're slowing down the wavelengths of light in order to create, as you heard here, everything from vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin D, excuse me. We talked about dopamine, about beta endorphins, all created as the eye is slowing down the wavelength of light because of the mechanical structure being upside down in the back of the eye, that nerve. And now it creates things with mass. As we meditate, we slow down our heart rate, our breath, our brainwave, and we're directing the light that's inside of us to create something out in 3D. And we're doing it by the same intention, by the same mechanical means. We're taking light and we're slowing down the particles so that it creates mass, and then boom, it pops out into 3D form. You can do so many things. This, for people who have read Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe, I would say, Dr. Joe's books are off the charts, incredible. Becoming Supernatural, I did a read, review, and reply of that several years back. You can read all 14 chapters of his book, get it done in 14 days. If you just watch the playlist and read along, you'll have the entire book read in 14 days. There's also You Are the Placebo and Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. You read those books, then this is another must read. This goes so well hand in hand. Dr. Joe is a neuroscientist. He's doing cutting edge research on the effects of meditation on the physical body, where he even measures the metabolites, working very closely for the last 2 years with UC San Diego. There's a pretty large research team, and it's groundbreaking what he's discovering and confirming, because when we go to the week-long events, whether it's the advanced follow-ups, which are 3 days long, or we go to a 7-day week-long event where we are in his monastery and then we are meditating for 14 hours at a time. Yeah, every day we meditate for 14 hours. It's extraordinary the things that we see that take place there. But make no mistakes, we're slowing down the wavelengths of light through meditation, and then we're projecting that energy for the purpose of, many people are there to help heal something in the body, and other people are there to manifest, and then some of us are there for both. So got to get the Mitochondria Manifesto. Let me share with you guys here tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I want to make sure you guys are all invited. Come join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. Learn about the latest discovery in reverse aging. Have you ever wondered, how do I get my hands on the same tech that the Black Ops Navy SEALs are able to use, so that those guys are like Superman, right? How would you like to get your hands on some of that tech? How would you like to get your brain processing speed, your memory, and your focus and mental clarity to be clearer, better than it ever has been before? It's possible. And you can learn about that tomorrow at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern time. And for details, you can text here and I'll send you the link, or we can also, I'm going to flash, actually, if I put that, that's not going to have the member ID number, but actually what you need really is just to go to zoom.us. And I'm going to give you right now what the meeting ID is for the Zoom so that you can join at 2 p.m. Just like Carol, she's my co-host. She's usually on here Monday through Friday, Monday through Saturday. And that meeting ID is, got your pen and pencil? It's 714-794-5626. Okay, my friends and gems, it's been a joy to be with you here. Carol, any comments you want to add to this in closing?
No, this is very interesting to learn. I love that our environment, how it affects us. I've learned that years ago, and it's very true. When you can see it, see the changes.
It really is. And so many people are completely unaware that their environment does play a part. You know, I know that you and your husband were very conscious from the get-go, and you chose not to live in the big city. You chose to be where in nature, where all the trees are, and you have lived this fabulous lifestyle of a lifetime of skiing and all this different outdoorsy, athletic, more in connection with nature, where it's cleaner air and just a cleaner environment, because you had that recognition. And so it does make a difference.
Does make a difference. Absolutely.
Does make a difference. All right. For those of you who want to tune in at 7 p.m. tonight, the same meeting ID for the Zoom. If you'd like to join us again at 7 p.m., we'll be diving deep into the cell activation patch. We'll be telling you how you can benefit from that. And so for now, ciao for now, my friends and gems. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.